Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here today. My name is Mike Feller, Chief Revenue Officer of ActivePipe, for those of you who don't know, and really excited to be joined today by Kevin Van Eck. He's Executive Vice President of Innovation at Properties. So Kevin, thank you for joining us. Really excited about having a conversation today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. Excited to be here.
Well, good. Well, listen, we'll give everybody a couple minutes here to join and kind of get settled in. And actually, while we're doing that, while people are coming on board, if you don't mind, just even in the chat box, just kind of sending us a quick note of who you are, where you're from, if you're an agent and broker, and we can try and cater some of the conversation accordingly. But Kevin, I think before we jump into, obviously today we're going to talk a lot about adoption. I mean, one of the things I'm brutally interested in, every single conversation we have with brokers or agents, it's constantly about adoption. I think this is something that I think across the board is going to be very top of mind here. So really pumped to get into the bulk of that. Before we do that, I think it'd be helpful just to maybe give the listeners here a little bit of background on you, personally. And obviously I'm always interested to hear sort of the person behind this, and that kind of sets a little bit of the framework for the discussion today. So if that's cool, you maybe just give everybody a little bit of background here, Kevin, kind of where, what your path has been up until this point.
For sure. So I started out in real estate in 2008 or 2007, really. It was a calculated move because we knew the market was crashing. Prior to that, I had been in restaurant franchising. And so at that time in 2006, 2007, that market dried up. No one was liquid enough to start a franchise. And so took a big risk in becoming a broker in real estate. And it paid off. But I'll tell you, people thought I was a little nuts for doing so at that time.
Sure.
And then 2012, I joined Properties in 2008. 2012, I moved to the staff side, and then have moved forward since then.
That's all. I imagine it's been a little bit of a change, right, to getting over to this side of the house in the real estate.
Yeah, it's a little different because there's a lot of gratification that comes with working with clients, right? And the sales cycle, the relationships you build, they all move relatively quickly. And I think on the staff side, when you're helping agents grow their business and helping support teams, the gratification may not come as quickly, but it's just as rewarding. It just took me some time to come to terms with the timeline.
Yeah, totally. No, that's awesome. So I'm always interested just because I come from a different background in real estate as well, across a number of different verticals. So always good to hear kind of the person behind this. So why don't we, just in the interest of time here, Ken, let's get to the bulk of the conversation around adoption. Okay, this is something that is talked about constantly. I think you guys as a brokerage are as tech forward as as a company that we've ever come across, and I think certainly in our conversations, I love the way you think about this stuff. So really would love to dig right into that and say, okay, how do you think about it? And when you talk about adoption, how do you guys really think about maximizing that at the brokerage level and working with your agents?
I think it's quite simple when you write it down on paper, but it's really difficult to implement. I think we all know the right things to do. We can all verbalize them, we can all talk about them, but actually implementing them sometimes can be difficult. And I think the root sometimes is that we either make bad decisions in the tech that we buy. We make decisions for the wrong reasons. We can talk a little more about that, but I think for us, what we look at is really helping the agent, bottom line, helping the agent sell as much real estate as possible. And that's a benefit that leads to brokerage growth, to agent growth, and to all of the reasons why we adopt tech, which is recruiting, retention, and again, profitability and increased revenues.
Yeah, totally. So how do you all think about that? So I know you've talked a lot about, one of the things that in one of our previous conversations, we talked about looking at this as sort of a collective mentality and really kind of taking the onus on the brokerage really to help agents learn and you understand the tools. Like how do you all think about that? Maybe kind of dig into some of the things that you all, on a very specific level, tend to think about.
Sure. I think, the first thing, and if it's okay, I'm going to pull up some slides really quickly just to guide.
Yeah, totally.
Because I'm going to talk through some things, and I want to make sure that we can all grab, the high points, because adoption is important. And again, whether it's technology or whether it's a marketing resource, whatever it might be, adoption is important across the board. But I think technology has some special challenges to it. So when we think about it, adoption, we already talked a little bit about what the obvious reasons are why adoption is important. We all know this, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's revenue, right? It's increasing revenue, and it's revenue for the agents and revenue for us as a brokerage. But I think it starts when we start thinking about technology. We are known at Properties for building our own. I would say, roughly 95% of what we have, we built in-house.
Yeah.
And so, not every brokerage has the opportunity to decide to do that. And, we can talk later maybe about how we make that decision. But I think what we build or what we buy, we're driven by a couple of things. The first is you can't choose tech because it's cool, right? It has to be something that delivers those outcomes that we talked about: increased revenue, profitability, recruiting, retention, all of that, right? So in order to drive adoption, there has to be a big problem. This is what we look for when we get an idea or we're pitched something, is that we got to ask, okay, what's the problem? Is the problem big enough? It has to be a big enough problem to change habits. And sometimes and I think I've shared this with you in the past, is that sometimes as broker owners or managers or supervisors, whatever, we pitch ourselves against our agents. And what we say sometimes in our mind or sometimes out loud is, I don't know why they're not using the tools. Like, they should be using the tools. But, if we've done what we're supposed to do, they will use the tools. If we've asked ourselves, what is in it for the agent? Why would the agent use it? Does it solve a big enough problem? Then they will use it,
Sure. Yeah.
And I think for us, oh yeah, what, Mike?
No, keep going. Carry on.
Yeah, I think for us, another big thing that we look at is features versus user experience. There are so many tools out there that have so many features, or it's heavily laden with all this functionality. But we actually think here that, making something simple that solves that problem is better than creating something that tries to solve every problem. Mm-hmm. A lot of times that results in confusion. People aren't sure why the technology is there, what to use it. And everyone's busy. Going back to the agents are lazy comment, they're not. We're not lazy. We're being sold things. We're negotiating deals. We're closing transactions. We're prospecting. The goal is that, it has to be easy for someone to learn. It has to have one function that solves that problem. And that's really a driver for us when we start to get lofty goals in what we want our technology to achieve.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, what I'm hearing there is that it comes down to really, it's an enablement tool, right? It's how do you enable agents to really focus on really the high value selling activities, and by putting the right tools in place, how do we help them become much more efficient and productive, right? So, yeah, absolutely.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I won't go into, anyone can find I won't go into vetting the technology. You can find those questions anywhere. You could Google it. You can find it on Inman or wherever you want to go. So we don't need to talk about that. But what I do want to talk about then is the plan, right? Because this is key. And a lot of times we go into things without a plan, without something detailed, without a plan owner, someone who's going to drive the technology in terms of adoption. So for us, one of the things that we don't do trial periods. Mm-hmm. I think trial periods are dangerous. And I think they're dangerous, in a couple of ways. One is, if you expect a group of users, a group of agents and the management team to really dig into something, to really use it, to really figure out the best use cases, to give you feedback, it can't be something that they think is only going to be around potentially for 2 months or 6 months. For them to change habits and implement it in their business, they have to feel like the time invested is going to pay off, and it's going to be something they're able to use down the road. So a lot of times trial periods stop before they start.
Yeah, that one's interesting, Kevin. That one's certainly from our side of the house, and hearing that from your side, I think that's an interesting one, just because, I think at the end of the day, it comes back to, what is that core problem that we're trying to solve, right? And if there's a clear need there that we're coming into, there's really an investment on both sides to solve that. And what we found is that that trial period, that beta testing, that can be very challenging if it's not laid out very well, if they're not key milestones, key checkpoints, and frankly, accountability on both sides, we've seen that's certainly an uphill battle. But I'm really interested to hear that, certainly from your side of things.
Yeah, I think, and you're right. It's not to say that every trial period or beta testing period fails. I just think that the challenge is to what you say, accountability and making sure that the message is clear and being communicated and people are bought in into a trial period. Otherwise, again, if nobody's bought in, if managers are downplaying it before it even exists, it's not going to happen. So sure. I think the other thing, the biggest goal of the plan really is to maximize exposure, right? And understanding, like you want to get it out to as many people as possible. And I equate it to, listing a property. I equate it to creating exposure for a property, except this is even easier because we actually know our audience and we work with them every day. We know our demographic. We know who we're trying to target. But a lot of times we just throw things out there and expect that agents will sign up for a webinar, or that they'll attend a training, or that they'll log on and watch a video, or whatever it might be. So in this case, maximize the exposure to the maximum number of agents in your team that you can. And so if we break it down to steps, I really think and this happens during the choosing the right tech period too, where you have to come up with the top 3 to 5 uses for the technology. And this goes back to the what's in it for me for the agent, right? Like, why would they use it? How is it going to benefit them in any number of ways? And the biggest thing in benefiting the agent, these top 3 to 5 uses have to directly benefit the agent in differentiation, I believe, helping them capture more business, in efficiency, in allowing them to work on prospecting or engage in relationships and do more with their clients. And lastly, I think it really has to, I think at the end of the day, help them sell as much real estate as possible. If there's not a clear direct line between the tool, how it works, and how they are going to succeed, then, and if we can't communicate that clearly and the expected results, then we got to go back to the drawing board and figure it out, right? Yeah. And to that point, one of our mottos here at AppProperties, and this comes from Thad Long, one of our co-founders, is brevity is the word for 2020. Nobody's reading long emails, nobody's reading long articles. There's a reason why, online digital newspapers, all the articles have gotten shorter. There's a reason all these things. And it's similar for us. If we want to get a message across, we cannot be verbose. We have to be able to state it very clearly and concisely, stating those 3 points. So, the next step will be the management and support. And I'm a huge proponent of everybody has to know what's going on, so that when an agent asks a question, that question can be answered by anybody within the organization, right? So whether it's an office manager, part of the coaching and training team, one of the managing brokers, they have to be able to answer it. Otherwise, it already, in the agent's mind, seems like something that doesn't exist, isn't going to happen, or isn't valuable enough for them to try. Yeah. So I think that's a super important step. And then, the next part would be the super user. And the super user group. And I want to delineate this from a beta test or a trial period. We've already bought, at this point, we have the technology, we're in, we've vetted it, we know this is going to work. The super users, we're being told we tell them that they're getting a first look, right? So they become the people that, maybe there are some techie people there, maybe there are some across all, age demographics and regions. But I think for us, those people become the spokespeople for the tool. And they become the ones that we go back to for feedback after, call it a week or 2 week period after they've been in. We revise our top use cases, and we get testimonials from them so that we can use their headshot and we can use their testimonial because everybody knows them within the company. So now we're promoting the tool through an agent who's already creating success with it.
Great.
Then,
so with Kevin,
we get to
before you go on there. So you've obviously got this pretty well dialed in. This is something that I think you guys understand on a very deep level. I'm curious that whether it's in the previous 3 to 4, 5 months, when we started to see COVID hit, or even now when we're, experiencing this in a lot of markets, at least experiencing this pent up demand and even a greater, inventory shortage. Has any of this changed? Any of this stuff, any of your messaging here, any of your plan, has that changed? Or when, you talked earlier about brevity, as far as being one of the key focal points, has it not changed? It's just mainly just dialing down and being much more focused in certain areas? Kevin, I think we lost audio there just for a sec.
I think am I back?
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry about that.
Gotcha.
Okay. So I think, over the last 5 or 6 months, 4 months, one of the things that we've had to tie our messaging to is a message of hope and positivity. So I think, I said brevity. It doesn't mean that our emails are emotionless and, fact-based, but I think but we've had to tie it to how this is going to help someone come out of whatever happens, whatever cycle, whatever pandemic. And I think that was the big fear. The end of March and the beginning of April was a scary time because no one knew what was happening with the pandemic, with our careers, with real estate. And there were a lot of predictions being made, but nobody knew. And I think, one of the messages that we conveyed at that time was take this time right now to become excellent. Take this time right now to learn the tools you haven't. Take this time right now to sharpen your skills, because as soon as we're allowed to do showings, open houses, see people in person, these tools are going to set you apart. They're going to differentiate you immediately.
Yeah. I love it. Cause the time to invest in that is now, right? Or it was, at that point in time. So.
Yeah. And we rolled out actually in April, we rolled out a new open house tool that we have that we built in-house. Mm-hmm. And there were no open houses happening in April in Illinois. Or Michigan or Indiana or Wisconsin.
Sure.
So we rolled it out anyway, and we used that same messaging, which was, hey, let's be prepared. Let's be prepared. And we were talking the message about pent-up demand and, all of a sudden the floodgates being released, and that is exactly what happened, where all of a sudden we had, in some cases, 20, 30, 40 attendees at open houses at a single time. Being safe, socially distancing, not everybody in at the same time. But that was a good opportunity because everybody then, as soon as that was possible, they knew how to use our open house tool.
Awesome.
So I think the launch, here's another question that you have to ask yourself when you roll something out. And we've killed projects because of this, where when you think to yourself, okay, I have to make this a big deal. And if you feel, sensitive, if you sense hesitation in yourself in making something a big deal, probably shouldn't roll it out, right? Because that means that it's not going to have a big impact. If you feel like you are overselling or overblowing something that you need to roll out, it's probably not good, right? It's probably not solving the problem you need, and it's not solving what your agents want or need to grow their business. So, make it a big deal and have enough lead time. Don't rush it. And here's what we do sometimes, because I've seen it. We've done it, where something goes live for us and we'll send out, with 4-day notice on something rolling out. That doesn't work. That's a huge mistake we've made in the past.
Yeah.
You need to create buzz. And I call it the Apple effect. And I'm sure there are books or somewhere else that where people say similar things. But I always think about, how did they get 1,800 people outside an Apple store in the rain waiting for an iPhone? How did they do that? It's because they created buzz. They didn't just put something on the shelf. They talked about it for months. They released, different functions, how it's going to be different. And that's how they created buzz. I do it the same way when we market properties, but in terms of technology, we have to do that, where create buzz so people can't wait to get it. And in marketing the launch, this is where communication is key across your whole team too. Everybody needs to be on the same page to market, to message that this launch is coming. And so one of the things that we do that, we've learned is our managing brokers are busy, our office managers are busy, our coaching and training teams are busy. So we have to write the messaging for them. And then we schedule it out for them. So could you please send this on Tuesday? And that way the agents are receiving consistent messaging consistently leading up to the launch.
Yeah.
And then, I think incentivizing, sometimes we overblow incentivizing. I talk with other broker owners and managers, and, sometimes people say, well, I don't have the money to do something, but you don't have to do something big. You don't have to get someone a new car for using your technology.
Right.
Really, all it is a couple of simple things. One is, looking at your super users and recognizing them for using it. As soon as it's launched and people start adopting it, as soon as agents start using it, find out who your people are that are going to be future super users and recognize them, whether it's at office meetings, sales meetings, and then get a testimonial from them. And the best kind of incentivization is when you have an actual success story where the tool created another sale, where it created another client, where it created interaction that otherwise wouldn't have happened. That is the best. And I think also, with the incentivization, I think one of the things we did, catch them using it. I think that's a phrase, again, across a ton of books, but catch them using it. So we did, after we rolled out our open house tool and we were free to do open houses, we started doing open house crashing to catch people using it. And it blew up on social media where we were giving away iPad stands for their iPad for using the open house tool. And they were branded and they were cool, but it was not super expensive. It's not something that, was terribly difficult to do, but we got a lot of play on social media for that, driving others to start using the tool.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So Kevin, all this stuff here, I mean, just to be explicit here, these are all things that you all kind of take the reins on. As the broker, you guys take the reins on this and own this part. That's one of the things I'm hearing because, on our side of things, we pay very close attention. It's obviously really important on the implementation side to do things right. And I think that we've got that pretty well dialed in. But what I love to hearing, I mean, this is all stuff that you guys are owning. You guys are really investing time and focus and energy on here.
I love that you just said that, because that's one of the things that sometimes we do wrong in our industry, where we rely on someone else to drive it within our own companies. And the problem with that is you just have to think about who has the relationship. Mm-hmm. A vendor doesn't have a relationship with my agents. I do. So who are they most likely to listen to trust, to believe when we make statements about how it's going to improve their business or their life? So I'm so glad you said that, because it's a really important point. If you want adoption, it has to be the people with relationships driving it.
Sure. Yeah.
And not to say that messaging from your team or from any other vendor, it's not to say that that's not effective, but I think you can't rely on an outside party to communicate to your agents solely.
Totally. No, and at the end of the day, it's got to be something that's pretty well dialed in on both sides, right? To really truly partner in that capacity. And at the end of the day, like you said, you all have the relationships, so figuring out how to best leverage that is what's probably most important.
Yeah, and I think with the communication, with leveraging the relationships, this is the key now. Really, is to keep driving it. And this is where we get into some real takeaways, I think, for today. If anyone's watching this, where they have a situation where they don't have great adoption right now on a tool they already have that's out there. And I think the first is realizing, out of sight, out of mind. You may have had a great launch. You may have had a ton of adoption at the beginning, in the first week, in the first 2 weeks maybe, but you have to continue to message it. Yeah. And there are, one of the things I think about, especially for us, as we continue to roll out new tools, and I look at examples of other big brokerages that have made this mistake where they continue to roll out new tools but don't resurface the ones they already have. Yeah. And what happens then is it creates confusion. People stop using what was in what you rolled out a year ago, 2 years ago. They forget about it, out of sight, out of mind. And all of a sudden you have this this tech stack that people can't explain. They don't know what's in it. And so consistently messaging what you already have is super important. So here's what I think has been effective for us, and also with some partners. We have a partner in Atlanta, Ansley, Atlanta, that's doing this now too. And they are, increasing adoption every week enormously by doing these. And that's specifically email drip campaigns to their own agents. Mm-hmm. And so, a good example of this is we started a Did You Know program. And so we take one function, one of those top 3 to 5 uses for each of the tools, and we've got a schedule set up where every Tuesday a message goes out that says, did you know? And it's just one quick tip, how it's going to improve their business, why they should check it out. And that has driven adoption, immensely, even amongst the tools that they've had now for 6 months, 7 months. So I think that's super effective.
I love that, Kevin. I always ask in all these conversations, what's one thing that's like super tactical that people can implement literally today? You kind of beat me to it. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, that and this other one, one of the things we do, you have to think, again, like marketing like an agent does to their sphere. So what we do here is we use digital advertising to advertise our tools to our own agents. Mm-hmm. And so we use tools like AdWorks and social media, and AdWorks has this great program, the Sphere campaign, which will target, you upload your database and it takes it, Facebook and Instagram similarly. So it makes it really easy to continue to create exposure. And as tools increase in, if you add a new functionality or a new integration or something to these tools, that is a great way to put it out too. Because we're all sensitive to more email. Nobody wants more email, right, Mike? Like nobody wishes they got more email.
Sure. It's got to be relevant email. If they don't care about it, they don't want more. So yeah.
Correct.
Totally.
And so that's where your product comes in. I think your product is great because I think it hits the way that agents can use it is super effective in specifically delivering relevant information at the right time. And it's the same thing here. If we're marketing our tools to our agents and bombarding them, filling their inbox with, I don't want to say self-serving because it's not, but there's going to be some sort of rejection. For us, though, in using these tools, again, specific messages, very clear, and then marketing to them, just as they do to their clients, we found a lot of effectiveness in creating exposure that way. And then the last piece, and I kind of skipped over this, I think a necessary function of every tool or technology that someone might build or adopt, analytics. You have to have analytics. And I know this sounds basic, but I feel like there are a lot of things out there where you can't really drill down easily into who's using it, so you can't target. So this is possibly another takeaway, which if you have a tool that has analytics, and let's be realistic about it. Let's be realistic as if we're an agent prospecting. In agent prospecting, most agents are not going to call 50 people a day, right? So in terms of the analytics, if you find someone that's not using the tool that should, whether it's based on production or whether it's based on whatever it might be, focus on them. Have your managers reach out to one person per day and ask them about the tool, ask them to use it, spend 10 minutes, introduce them to it, and I think it will be a good outcome. And then that's where, using your office level teams to generate the message and continue the message is important too. I think where, it can't just be the training and coaching team. It can't just be the managing broker. If you can use the office manager or some other support staff to be able to reach out, if they're knowledgeable about the tool, then they'll also be able to help drive adoption within the company.
Totally. I love that. Like the analytics side, I mean, look, one, you're speaking my language. I think, on the marketing side, I think it's really interesting how you guys are thinking about that, because you're actually using some of the tools to actually market to your agents, right? And so I think that's a really interesting way to kind of frame adoption. And, look, Wes Hubbard, AdWorks, good friend of mine. This is a different conversation. We caught up on the golf course on Friday, Kevin. I'll let you ask him how that went and everything. But look, they're close partners of ours, and we got a really cool integration with that Sphere campaign. And so I think that's actually cool for me to know how you guys are using that internally to drive adoption.
Yeah, we sometimes skip over the tools that we provide to our agents to use internally ourselves, So I think today, if we were to recap the takeaways, and I'm stealing your thunder here, Mike, because this was the question you said you were going to ask.
You keep going. Keep going, man. Keep going.
But I think, here's the thing. If you already have a tech stack, if you already have tools out there, and like if we're going to be real with ourselves, we know that it's not being used as widely as it should be, just start with one and create universal knowledge. And what I mean by that is start as if you're relaunching. Start with your management team, start with your office level staff. And the reason this is so important, and this is something really great that our ops team has done at App Properties from the very beginning, which is all of our office managers, all of our office staff are as trained on the tools as our training and coaching team. And the reason being is that those people are in the offices every day. Agents come up to them every day. And and that creates efficiency in terms of getting agents answers they want immediately. So if you can start over with one tool, make sure everybody knows about it, make sure everyone understands, and this doesn't mean the technical, detail in it, but I think it does mean at least the ability to answer the FAQs that come up. And in that point, ask your team today what FAQs come up about the tools you have, because that could drive knowledge in terms of what you need to push. That could drive your next "Did you know" campaign. That could drive, the messaging. If there is a consistent question that comes up about a tool, let's put it out there and let's answer it. And that will help drive adoption as well. And then lastly, we talked about advertising like your agents. Use all the tools available to you, and those tools are super affordable, and it'll pay off if it's got the right message.
No, that's fantastic. Kevin, loved hearing about it. I know we're kind of coming up towards the end on time here, but look, is there anything else maybe outside of some of the things you laid out there that kind of given the environment, kind of given what's ahead, which is a whole nother animal, but the back to school's coming up here soon, and that, the fall timeframe's coming up. Anything further that you would maybe leave some folks with in terms of suggestions around, this time period as it relates to adoption? Anything else that you want to maybe leave the audience with?
I think Zoom, as much as we all have Zoom, fatigue or whatever they call it, I think Zoom will and has become one of the most, creates the most efficiency we've seen in a long time for us. The ability to touch a large group of people easily. And so with that, we come back to brevity. And I think a lot of times on Zoom, our Zoom meetings are too long. We've become too verbose. We have long slideshows. And a lot of times on Zoom, what we end up doing, because we can't see the reactions in people's faces, is that we bore them. We bore them to, sleep. And I think the reason we do that sometimes when we're driving adoption, we do this live too, but I think I see it happening more on Zoom, where it becomes less about how the tool will improve your business, what the top uses are, and it's become more of a technical click here, this is what you do, more of a tutorial walkthrough as opposed to a why you should use this. So that's my piece of advice. I've seen a lot of people translate into the Zoom where, it's like they're operating in a tunnel. And again, Mike, if I couldn't see your face, I wouldn't know your reactions to what I'm saying, your body language. Yeah. And that's what happens when you're presenting on Zoom. So you just have to be self-aware and cognizant of how your message is being received when you're rolling something out.
Yeah, so this comes back to one of your earlier points, right, around user experience versus feature, and also focusing on the business value, less about that click here, click there, et cetera. So no, that's great. So no, that's fantastic here, Kevin. So, we'll leave maybe the last couple minutes here for those of you in the audience. If you've got questions, please feel free to share them in the chat or the Q&A sections. We'll leave a few minutes to field any questions if there are some. They've just done that fantastic of a job there, Kevin, explaining everything. Everybody's good to go.
Maybe, or maybe everyone logged off. Just kidding. We could see everyone on there. But thanks, Mike. This was really great. I really appreciate it, and hopefully this was helpful to some of the folks that were attending. And then I'll send this slideshow to you too if you want to send it out or use it if anyone inquires. Yeah,
no, I think that sounds great. So yeah, it looks like they're letting us off easy here, but no, Kevin, always great catching up. Thank you for joining us. Super insightful, and thank you for everybody who hopped on here today.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Hope you have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.